What are the challenges you face as a freelancer, right? Although you talked about that, maybe I want to dive deeper into that, even from a learning aspect, right?
So the first thing, like you said, is you're very much solo here unless you're subcontracting or you're working with a partner or something like that. Then there's also the lack of stability. Like you said, sometimes you might make X your monthly salary in like half a month and then there's no clients for like 3 months.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I think after the product design podcast, many of you had reached out saying, yeah, how can I start freelancing as a designer, right? And this was the most commonly asked question. So today I have invited Likitha, who has been a freelance product designer. Plus she has also worked with design agencies before, and she has also worked as a product designer at many SaaS companies like Customer Glue. Thanks a lot, Likitha, for joining. If you can give a quick introduction to audience, it would be great.
Yeah, hi. I'm Likitha. I've been working as a product designer for a little less than 5 years at this point. So I began working with an FMCG product company where I did everything from website design to packaging design, literally anything that had to do with design. I did that there. Then for a year, I worked at an agency where I learned a lot about actually how product design works, right? Before that, I figured out everything by myself. So I actually did my bachelor's in BBA and I was a self-taught designer. I transitioned into product design straight out of college. I did not have a degree in design. I just learned everything on the internet. So after the agency, I somehow stumbled upon consulting. It happened to me. I did not seek it out. So then I started freelancing with a couple of companies. And while I was doing this, I also did a master's in UX design online. And yeah, here we are today.
So I think this podcast is going to be more focused on freelancing, but if you want to learn more about product design, you can check out the previous podcast. I'll be attaching the link in description. So the first question I want to understand is, okay, so now somebody is a product designer already working in a full-time job, or somebody who's just starting out. How should they choose between, okay, should I go with freelancing or full-time job? What are the factors they should consider?
I don't think this is an either or situation. It depends upon how you approach your career, to be very honest. It depends on your personal goals. Some of the factors that you should keep in mind is that when you freelance, you're left to your own devices. You learn by doing, and that is not a great way to start any career. It might work for some people, but ideally, I would always recommend working with other people who've been doing this for a while, like a team or an agency for a couple of years before you fully get into freelancing. That way, you understand how things are done, how to do the right things, how to know what are the right things. Otherwise, you might just learn whatever hacky ways to do certain things and it might help you, but I don't think that's the best way to approach these things. But once you have done that, right, let's say you've done this for like 2-3 years and now you're kind of deciding, do I want to do freelancing? Do I want to take care of my own schedule, or do I want to continue with whatever I'm doing? I'm pretty sure this is a thought that crosses most product designers' minds at some point. So that's when you have to consider a couple of factors like stability. Are you someone who needs a standardized monthly salary credited to your account for whatever reason, be it like your mental state or actual, like, financial planning or something like that? You also probably want to think about the product itself. Like, are you someone who enjoys solving one problem in depth, mastering that entire domain? Or are you someone who you want to context switch a lot? You want to keep changing products. You want to keep changing the overall view of whatever you're doing, right? And like I said, money on the other hand is actually lucrative on both ends, whether you're working full-time or freelancing. And then there's also this illusion of time that people have, that is freedom of time. It's an illusion. I say that because sometimes with a job, it's set in stone. You work 5 days a week, you work between say 9 and 6 p.m. or something like that, and then you're done. Some people think, oh, freelancing means I can work 3 hours a day and I'll chill after that and I will like make more money than I was working full-time. Not really, no. Freelancing may sometimes mean you're actually working more than what you would at a full-time job, and sometimes that may mean you're not even making as much, but sometimes it could translate differently. But the only, I would say, upside of freelancing is that you can control how much work you take on at any given point, which you can't when you're working full-time. So you have to consider all of these factors and only then make a decision. But then again, there's no harm in trying freelancing at some point in your career, but you should be ready even if things go south.
Got it. Perfect. I think two main parts. So one is the stability of money and the illusion of time. Doesn't mean like you'll be free all the time or you'll get more time compared to full-time. And second is everybody have a portfolio that they would have designed, right? And for a freelancing, does the portfolio need to be a bit different, or is there a difference in approach of building your portfolio if you're looking for a job versus if you're looking for freelancing, because you have done both?
Yeah, there's definitely a huge difference in crafting a portfolio when you're approaching these two different aspects. It is obvious that there's actually two different things that you're catering. The way you sell yourself changes in both of these aspects. I had written one LinkedIn post on this as well. But to briefly sum it up, right, when you're applying for jobs, you're actually catering to a hiring manager, design manager, and all of those people. Now, these people, what do they value in a potential hire, whether at a junior level or at a senior level? There are certain metrics they want to see. At junior levels, they want to see what all are the different skills that you can perform. How good are you at each of those things? Are you a team player? Do you communicate well? All of these things they want to see. Again, along with like the basic things like problem solving, UI design skills, and all micro interactions and stuff like that. Apart from that, they also want to see these other aspects. And at a senior design position, I'm pretty sure they want to see your leadership skills. How do you foster collaboration? So all of these also have to go into your portfolio when you're applying for jobs. But when it comes to freelancing clients, now the thing is, when you're freelancing, you work in all sorts of different products, right? So the more diverse your portfolio is, the more likely you're going to get a green signal from a potential lead. So that way you have to show breadth of work. Obviously, there's depth in these as well, but you can show that at a different stage or not show it at the first go itself. And with each client, you might have to create a different portfolio so that if there are relevant projects, you want to focus on that. Remove all the other. If you're applying, if you're talking to a client who's in B2B SaaS, why are you going to show food delivery app, for example, if you worked on it? Irrelevant. Okay. You could show bits of it in the end, but the main thing you should sell that, okay, I can solve for your problems as well. Right? And you should focus on, when it comes to freelancing also, like I said, apart from the diversity of it, how you collaborate with clients, all of that is also very important to showcase that in your portfolio. And client testimonials, that's another thing. If you can include that in your portfolio, talk about how other clients have worked with you, that can again give them more confidence in wanting to work with you. Apart from all of this, apart from your portfolio itself, in freelancing, a key thing would always be budget and timelines. So if these two things match and your work is something that they like, usually most of the time it's a go with most clients.
Got it. So I think summarizing like three things. One is you should have breadth of work and maybe personalize according to each client, industry specific. And third is you should build trust with testimonials. So the next thing is, okay, how to get your first clients in freelancing. And I also saw in your LinkedIn profile, you had written product design partner for SaaS companies. So when you start freelancing, should you specialize in, let's say, one particular industry, or you should first try out different industries and then say, yeah, I'm going to become like a specialist in this industry? So I'll focus on that. So two questions. So how to get your first clients in freelancing, and should you start specialization from start itself or later?
So firstly, to answer your second question, no, always be a generalist first. Do everything on the face of the planet. When I say generalist, I'm even saying things like if you can dip your feet into branding, animation, micro interactions, prototyping, packaging design, social media graphics, graphic design, do everything in the beginning, right? Because when we talk about just freelancing, ideally when a client wants to work with you, he doesn't want to look for someone else to do something else. He'll be like, I've hired, do everything. Do product design, do website design, do logo, do branding and all of that. It would be amazing if you could do everything, but there are workarounds for this as well, right? Let's just say you don't like doing it and you're at a position where you're like, I don't want to do this. And if they're okay with hiring someone else, they might. But sometimes this could be a deal breaker, especially early on in your career. You tell them, I only do app design, I don't do anything else. They'll be like, no, I'll find someone else who'll do everything, right? So it's better to be a generalist and work with clients who want a lot more than you're comfortable doing in the beginning, at least, so that later you can specialize. Later you can be like, you know what, this is all I do, but I can help you hire other people, or I can subcontract other people to do other aspects of whatever design work that you need, and that should be okay with them, because at that point you have that much leverage. They want to work with you for a reason if you've been in the industry like for 6, 7, 8 years, right? And the first question that you asked is how to get your first clients in freelancing. This is, for me, I know it might not be relatable to a lot of people, because my thing, like I told you, my entry into freelancing was never intentional. It just so happened. I was going to be on a break, and then a friend of a friend reached out to me saying they were looking for someone to work part-time with them, and I took it upon. After that, I made some contacts while I was working them, and just one after the other, I ended up just finding clients. It's mostly been inbound for me. Someone will refer me to someone, and if it works out, I work with them. It's always been like that. I haven't done outreach, but the reason why I get inbound leads is because I'm also active on social media. So I keep posting about being a product designer, my work. I post a lot of other things as well, but there is some focus on this. So that way I'm in people's head. Okay, she is a product designer, that to freelance. So if someone asks them, and if they're a full-time designer, are you willing to work on projects? Maybe I'm one of the first people that comes to them. And no, actually I know a freelance designer, you can reach out to her. So there are some lead magnets usually that people get on some of these freelancing platforms, like, these days Contra is really popular. There's Fiverr, Upwork and all of that. I've never done that. I do not know how that works, but that's where they go and get their initial first few clients. But for me, like I said, this is another alternative route that may or may not work, which is be active on social media, sell your skills, and just tell people that, hey, listen, I am a freelance product designer. If you know of anyone who needs such services, just let them know. At one point, someone will refer you to someone, and that will get the ball rolling.
I think I've seen a couple of your posts where you post like the screenshot of the design or like the designs you had done, right? So that gives more engagement and also let people know that you are working. Got it. Perfect. And the next common question is setting the pricing, right? As we already talked about the difference between full-time versus freelancing. So let's say somebody is earning 1 lakh a month as a full-time person. They might earn it in one project, that money, right? So how to set pricing? And also just want to ask, does the pricing should change according to client, or should it be fixed? So let's say I've been talking to a couple of my friends, like they charge different for, let's say, maybe a US versus Indian client, or maybe like a funded company versus a bootstrap, or maybe small team versus big team, or even industry specific. So let's say working on fintech versus a normal B2C apps. How to set pricing? What are the parameters one should consider, and how much they should charge?
Yeah. So the how much you should charge is never going to be a straightforward single number. But what I initially did to calculate an average price was, I took how much I'm making per month. I divided that by 160 hours. Okay. And then I kind of like added 20. So doing that will give you an hourly rate. Okay. So that's how much you'll be working at like a full-time role, and hourly you'll be making XYZ amount. Okay. For that, you add like 20 to 30% just to account for this instability, lack of benefits that you get freelancing. That becomes your average hourly rate. After that, so I wouldn't personally recommend anyone to charge hourly for like design related tasks, because how are you going to quantify the time that you spent in the shower thinking about a design problem? Can't track it, right? So it's best to go ahead with like a fixed project rate or like a monthly retainer or something like that. So you basically then calculate average how many hours this project will take. You take your hourly rate, multiply it, add again any other overheads you want, and go ahead and quote that to your client. So with time, you will find that, okay, maybe the number that you're quoting is very less or it's very high, and you can normalize it. And also depending on the pace of the project, sometimes what people do is, you would take 12 weeks for it, but if they're asking for it in 8 weeks, you can be like, listen, I'm going to charge another 30% more because you need it this fast. And if they're okay with it, they're going to pay you that extra. That's how you will start with this. And the other question you asked is changing up prices based on client and industry and all, right? That is relevant. If you're working with an Indian client, usually if you were to quote what you would to a US client, that is too much for most of the clientele here, because there is that parity in how much we earn and how much we can afford to spend, right? So for some US clients, something that is extremely good amount for us as well is actually very cheap for them. For them, it is like hiring someone as a US counterpart is probably going to charge them 3x more. If you can assure them of the same quality at an XYZ price and they're okay with that, that's a lot more money than you'd be making with Indian clients. So it's okay to make those changes. And even the same thing applies for funded and bootstrapped. It's just that how much money can they expend on you? Sometimes you change these things because you know that they can afford you for that price. Why would you not want to, sell yourself at a price that they're willing to pay for? So standardizing your prices is not a very smart way to do these things.
Got it. Like one more cross question, you told about hourly rate, right? So let's say you are earning something and then you calculate and add extra 20-30%. So when you're doing a full-time job, let's assume you are earning 1,000 rupee per hour. If you're doing a full-time job, you might switch, you might get promoted, and your salary is going to increase. So your hourly rate is also going to increase, right? So let's say today I left my job, started freelancing, my hourly rate was 1,000. So I'm charging client 1,300 by putting that 30% extra. Right. So how should one accommodate that or think of that increasing the prices? Because you have been in 4 years. So assume you worked in a org, you might have become a senior product designer or a lead designer, right? So how should one think of that aspect of increasing their prices, because that would increase in their full-time job?
See, there's one thing, there's never such thing as a senior freelance product designer. Once you're a freelancer, that designation goes away. And honestly, these designations are also arbitrary. Not to throw shade at anyone, but I have met lead product designers who churn out designs. That's something that's I would expect someone who just started learning Figma last year, having problem solving skills that are very base level. Like there is no second order thinking, and they're probably working as leads and design managers. So I've always thought that these designations are pretty much arbitrary. Now that said, your value is something that you have to decide. So you can either look up and compare, look at other freelancers in the industry, see how much they're charging and compare your work against their work. Obviously you won't know for sure what happened behind the scenes, but based off of what they talk on their social media, when you can see their portfolio, especially if they run an agency, they have proof of work in their website, right? You go through all of that, you see the kind of work they do, the kind of finesse it has and how much they're charging. Sometimes nowadays, especially with this new thing called as design subscription agencies, where they basically charge you a flat monthly rate and you can literally start working with them tomorrow, and you start giving them requests on a Trello board saying do this, do that, and they start working on it straight away. But you have to pay them that fixed amount monthly. Whether or not you use them throughout the month, that's irrelevant. There's a fixed rate. Now a lot of these agencies, their proof of work is what people are with, and you have to pay first. There's no like design, there's no contract, nothing like that. First money should go to their account, only then they'll start working, right? So you kind of have to like compare your quality of work. Sometimes a designer who's only been in the industry for 2 years can produce quality of work that someone who's been doing for 8 years. Now, is it fair that he should charge a junior designer's price instead of a senior designer's price? Not really, no. If you can promise that quality, go ahead and charge whatever you feel like it's worth. You should be able to justify it though with the work that you're providing or the value that you're bringing to the table. So leave out the arbitrary titles and all. In fact, you can inflate your price right after one project. Let's say you did one project and you realize that you didn't charge enough. Next project onwards, hike it by 20% or something like that. So usually people do it in a 6 month to 1 year cycle where they hike it by 20%, but that's up to you to decide at what level will you be comfortable, and after which it's dependent on value and how much you bring to the table. First reach that value where you're happy with it, and after that you start thinking about how much more can I charge, how much more can I charge.
Got it. So the next thing is, what are the challenges you face as a freelancer, right? Although you talked about that, maybe I want to dive deeper into that, even from a learning aspect, right? Because if you work in a company, you know that the company has a user persona or a core problem that they are solving for, and you'll be working on the same. So maybe you'll have your learnings on that. Maybe you have also a team to support, brainstorm. You have a lot of resources which you can use or leverage on. But on freelancing, you might not have. So what are those kind of challenges you face as a freelancer?
Yeah. So the first thing, like you said, is you're very much solo here unless you're subcontracting or you're working with a partner or something like that. You're dependent on yourself for everything. So when you're stuck on a problem, then you actively have to reach out to your personal acquaintances, which is why a network is very important. Having designers in your network, no matter whether you're working full-time or freelancing, is important, because sometimes you might need another eye on something. You just show it to them, you ask them for a session, and then you workshop with them. This is a common thing where you're not able to crack a problem and there's no one else to help you with it, right? So that is a big challenge that you can face in terms of problem solving. Then there's also the lack of stability. Like you said, sometimes you might make X your monthly salary in like half a month, and then there's no clients for like 3 months. So are you prepared to deal with that? And in that time, what are your plans? Are you going to upscale? Are you going to make better lead magnets or work on, your personal skills? You have to learn to be okay with downtime if it comes, and it will come. It always comes every now and then. You should be really lucky to have a standard, consistent source of leads, and that'll come with good time. After you've done this for a couple of years, you'll always have someone wanting to work with you and all of that. Just getting there will take a while. And then adding on to that, that's what the marketing and anxiety with having to find clients all the time. You have to keep marketing yourself. Sometimes I keep like you notice, right? I keep posting design stuff, but sometimes I'm not quite mentally, I'm not doing well or something, but I still have to keep at it because that's how I'm making sure that my name is seen and I'm telling people that I'm working and all of that. And for example, if I don't have a client for 3 months down the line, I'm already worried about it because I know this project is ending in 3 months and another project is ending next month. Then what am I going to do in the third month? So I already have to start working on that while I'm working on these projects. It's a never ending thought process. And even taxation is a problem. At least in India, you'll have to register yourself, get yourself a GST registration after you cross a certain income level. And then you'll probably have to hire someone to help you do your taxes as well. So that'll become an issue. And that's also very taxing. You have to be up to date with like all of these things. And there's two very big things. One is when you're freelancing, you're not competing with another workmate or a colleague or some other guy in a different company, but you're competing at a global scale. The number of product designers across the world are too many to count, right? So how are you competing with them? How do you sell your value? It can be very demoralizing, by the way, because there's so many good designers out there and you constantly keep comparing. So it's very difficult that way. And now with the whole AI thing, that's another ball game altogether. But that's what. One thing with the whole AI thing in terms of design, all I have to say is like, learn to work with it, not against it. Working with it will make you better than half the people who are working against it. So yeah.
Perfect. I think the next thing is, so let's say if somebody is a beginner who's in maybe college or who have just started out. So what should be the step-by-step roadmap for them to get into freelancing? Assume they already know design, right? What should they do now? And also you talked about being a generalist versus specialist, right? So at start, which should they choose as something to get into freelancing? Should they choose UI design, graphic design, or like product design, interaction design? There are a lot of things, right, which they should choose to start with also.
Like I already made it clear in one of the first few questions you asked is if you're just starting out, don't do freelancing. You do, like I would say, you don't know head and tail of what needs to be done, and there's only so much you can learn through the internet also. So work with established companies or agencies at least for a year and understand what you're good at, what you're not good at, because the advantage of being around people is that they'll also tell you these things. Hey, you need to work on these skills. My year at the agency was very crucial for me because that's where I knew what I was good at, what I was not good at, and how to work on the things that I'm not good at. So do not start freelancing right off the bat. But that said, let's just say you've been meaning to work as a designer and someone reaches out to you saying, hey, would you like to work on this project for like some app design or website design or something? Don't say no. Take it, figure out, talk to people who have done it, reach out to people on the internet. People are willing to help. Surprisingly, most people are willing to reply with some amount of advice. So, take that project, figure things out, do it. It's okay to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but be optimistic about the whole thing. Go ahead and do it. But that said, I wouldn't say jump off to freelancing right off the bat. Work for a bit with a company or an agency, and don't focus on being a specialist in the beginning. Like, again, that's why I say work with an agency. I've always said that for most people is because there you get to be a generalist. They'll ask you to do everything and you get to put your hands in everything. And if you're not good at it, you're not good at it. It's fine. No big deal. Just be like, okay, this is not one of my best traits. So learn everything that you can, a bit of like branding, a bit of like logo design. I did packaging design when I was in my first company. We did no code development and I didn't know one line of code, by the way. So I had to learn a little bit of HTML and CSS back then. That was something that I was able to again use to sell myself to the next company I joined, that I was able to use a no code editor. Everything, if you know how to use it, you can always tell people that you're capable of doing a lot more with the given resources that you have, right? And these days, I would say motion design, micro interactions, that's the name of the game. Delight is a very big factor these days, especially with the fact that we have AI tools, right, that can churn out run-of-the-mill designs. These little things that you add into the product that only a human can do is what is going to make you stand out from the crowd. Master like all your design tools that are there. I know some people say that tools don't make a good designer, but I've always believed that there's a lot that you can do here in your head, but if it does not translate well, there's no point of being that good. Same thing with people who are writers. You can think great thoughts, but can you write and communicate to people? Yeah, so similar to that. So master your tools, work on them, look at tutorials, learn how to do fancy things, look at what's trending, keep practicing that so that you're always up to date with, the fancy things that are happening these days. You don't have to use it, but the fact that you can reproduce something like that if need be is all that you need to know when you're beginning out, right? And especially with these days with these AI tools like, Claude and Cursor and all, if you're starting out, I would say that it would be really great if you have this, you've done product design for this one small little case study or something like that, and then if you could build it out using these tools, or at least a small snippet of it that shows agency, and people will be like, okay, people are more willing to bet on you then. And at some point maybe you can become like a full stack engineer and designer if you spend enough time on both of these things. You'll be like this golden package to most people, right? So like I said, people don't want to hire multiple people, they just want one person who can get the job done always, right? So focus on being that sort of a person.
Correct. Perfect. And the next question I had is, let's say when you work as a freelancer, right? Who are the people you work with? When you work in a full-time job, you need to hand over it to developers. So what kind of stakeholders do you work with? Like, let's say founder, head of design, or PM, or developer. Who are the kind of people you would work with?
It depends on your project. So for me, there have been projects where I worked with an entire team. There's a PM, there's front-end engineers, there's back-end engineers, there's content writers. You also work with QA, because once you ship things out, they're doing engineering QA. You might as well sit with them and do design QA also, right? And there is also the CEO every now and then who pops up and he'll give you an overview of what's happening. Work with the entire startup. Okay, designers are one of those people who get to work with everyone, because there'll always be something that you need someone's input on. Not just while you're designing, but also before you design, for user research and all. Sales team also, that's very key. I have worked a lot with sales guys in general, because they're selling what you're designing, right? So sometimes you get feedback from them as well. So, and one of my clients right now, it's just me and him. He is a solo founder, he's also the engineer, he's also the sales guy, he's also the marketing guy. So it's just me and him right now. And I've also worked with teams where I just work with one of the senior designers and maybe engineers. That's about it. Nobody else is involved. So it depends upon the kind of arrangement that you have. But most of the time, you get to work with a lot of people, especially if you're doing website design also. Then the copy guys will come, these front-end web flow developers and all of that. Like, it's very collaborative in that sense.
Got it. And the last question is, this is a creative field, and there are higher chances that there's a creative block, right? You always need to be innovative in things. If you work on a same product, you have like a flow in your mind. Yeah, now I got this, so now I'll keep on innovating. But when you work as a freelancer, maybe today you work on a landing page, tomorrow you work on a B2B product, B2C app, etc. So how do you be more creative and innovative? From where do you get ideas, right? So it's very important to stand out, as you already told.
Yeah, so creative block will come even if you're, see, one of the advantage of freelancing is that when the creative block hits, you just switch context. You'll be like, I'll work on this project for a bit now, I'm not able to do anything here. So when you come back to it, that block is gone and you can like go ahead and start something new. But that said, if that is happening, luckily for us right now, it wasn't there when I started, but we have tools like Mobbin and all. So you go see how someone else solved a similar problem. You go look at like some of these inspiration sites, see what other products are doing, and then come up with ideas like that. If it comes to a UI based problem also, how do I make this look nice, fancy or something? There's thousands of resources out there to just take inspiration from. So that's something that I do. I sit and look at how other people solve certain things. And sometimes you also make it better just by looking at good examples of design. And the only takeaway that I have from one of my master's degree was this ideation thing, which is called Scamper. Now it is an abbreviation. I cannot tell you all of it, but the essence of it was that you basically take things, you mix things up, you remove certain things, you adjust things, and that's how you come up with something new altogether. Because it's very hard to be disruptive day in and day out. Disruptive ideas come once in a while. That's why they're called disruptive. But incremental ideas happen every day. So the idea is to be incremental until one of those disruptive things happen, right? So that you can basically do by using the Scamper method, SCAMPER. So that's something that I do a lot, like take multiple things, just jam it together, remove things, add things, modify certain things, and then that way you have something new altogether. That helps.
Got it. Like cooking a new recipe, like trying different ingredients. Thanks a lot, Likitha. I think it was a very useful podcast. You answered all the questions based on your experience and also quoting relevant examples. Thank you, everyone.